the world seems to be putting us in a situation that says, well, here's this ingenious thing I came up with. It's going to stop you flying, growing, and globalizing. One of the bedrocks of our understanding of the way the globalized world works, the free movement of people, I don't see that coming back. And I effectively don't see it coming back ever. Will all the people go back to the Irish bars? You know, squashed up against one another in these wonderful, happy, sweaty places, drinking pints of Guinness and listening to rebel songs? Will they? Will businessmen jump on a flight, you know, to Wuhan to try and sell some more BMWs to the Chinese billionaires? Will that happen? What does this mean for world trade? And the thing that strikes me is that this doesn't need any human intervention or any ingenuity or any plan. This is simply how it's going to unfold. People are going to find themselves restricted, localized, changed.
I'm speaking today with John Doyle, my good friend from Brussels, originally from Ireland. And John, I like to say that you work with the EU Commission in Brussels. You work for them for 20 years, yeah, or more. Mm-hmm. You're a lifer.
Yeah.
And but the opinions that you express and the statements that you make are your own, and they don't represent official opinions of the EU.
Correct. And in fact, it's one of the great things about the EU and the European Commission as well, that it's also primarily probably a generator of ideas. Its primary and first function is to come up with ideas, to take initiative for the benefit of European citizens, which is, you know, both a joy and a privilege and a responsibility. But it's actually the thing that makes the European Union unique. I'm probably particularly lucky in that I work a lot on Foresight, which gives us the chance to work, you know, outside normal strictures. But yeah, as I say, I'm proud to be an employee of the European Commission. But these views and my are mine.
And they sometimes kind of get you in hot water. Of course, we're all in hot water, but.
Well, I mean, in the sense that, as I said, the European Commission ceases to exist when ideas cease to bubble up. And one of my favorite bosses, an eminent Director General, famously told me, and this is a spirit that runs right through the Commission, he said, it's always better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. Okay. And so there's a spirit of that runs through the Commission, you know, a courageous will to take initiative, because this is our duty, our obligation, our right, and our honor to be that part of the system that takes the initiative, which is then adopted or not by the Parliament and the member states. So the right of initiative and the spirit of taking initiative and thinking independently is a very core part of what the European Commission does.
Great. It's not just simply rubber stamping things.
No. As I say, it is a public sector organization, sound and efficient management, guardian of the treaties, all that good stuff. But it is unique, I think, in the history of all public sector organizations worldwide in having this special remit to sit down, think about stuff, and come up with ideas that might ultimately be translated into legislation or specific actions. And that introduces a natural tension, but that creative tension is good. And you know, as I say, one has to work within certain strictures most of the time, but one is also hugely liberated to think freely. We all walk a line in our work, but the Commission is a particularly good place for people who want to bring the creative and new to to apparently intractable problems. The Germans and the French going to war every 50 years for about 300 years. I mean, how do you stop that?
Yeah.
Okay, you set something up where somebody comes up with generally very concrete ideas. How do we nationalize the things they keep fighting over? Nationalize is the wrong word, but how do we make common what they keep fighting over? Coal, steel, land. Okay, if these things were kind of in some way a shared responsibility, maybe they wouldn't fight each other all the time. So that's so it's both idealistic and very concrete.
Could you used one word before that you and I know has a special meaning, but we need to elaborate on that a moment, or you need to. You used the word foresight. Now it's an ordinary language member of the word in the English language, but it has a special meaning in the context that you used it. Please explain to us what foresight means.
Well, I can tell you what it means to me. My good friend who runs the Foresight network within the Commission, Nicholas, would probably disagree with me. But for me, it's a question of having people of various expertise and various interests consider problems that are likely to emerge. People often think that foresight is something to do with predicting, I don't know what color hair robots will have in 50 years, but it's really not that at all. It's a question of providing original and unfettered intellectual insights into how things are unfolding, or could unfold, or will unfold. I mean, we often, currently, because we're doing quite a bit of work thinking obviously around our existing challenges, we often try and remove the notion of future from foresight. So I would almost call it insight. It's okay, what's really happening? We know technically what's happening, and we think we understand that governments have to bail something out, but what's really happening? So that tends to be the thrust of the work. And funnily enough, it's always as much a learning curve for the practitioners as it is kind of an output for policymakers.
Yeah. Now, still, let me get to the kernel of what I didn't
Go
hear
for
you
it.
say, that
Okay.
Foresight is a group. It's a distinct group of individuals who work within the EU Commission, perhaps in addition some who are outside of it, but you gather together well, nowadays you don't gather together so easily, but you work together, you think together, you communicate as a group.
Yeah, correct. And there are several. In fact, this new commission has decided to mainstream foresight into all policy making at all levels, which is really interesting. Foresight has tended to be so there will be foresight activities across all the services. So whether it's dealing with research or agriculture or fisheries or strategies for transport, all of our commission services contain a foresight element, and those foresight groups can work quite independently on foresight for the specific area, but then they always then meet in a network of to exchange these ideas and see how foresight, both the specific insights for their field and the broader insights that we might generate through contracts and so on and so forth, might better inform the overall thrust of policy. Furthermore, both the European Parliament and the council also conduct their own foresight activities. So it's one of the things I often quote a lady called Anne Mettler, who was part of the previous commission. ESPAS, which was the European kind of assemblage of foresight actors within the three institutions, produced the report where they explicitly, and for the first time, and something I mentioned when I replaced you in Geneva, explicitly and for the first time mentioned that humanity was facing an explicit existential crisis, that if we didn't turn this around in a big hurry, there was a measurable and not insignificant chance that our species was going over the brink. Now this made quite a splash, headline wide, worldwide. So yeah, as I the notion of foresight is really, it's almost a safe space to think. And therefore attracts all sorts.
Good. No, thank you. I wanted to clarify that because
Yeah.
I hold the group, the Foresight group, in great honor
Mm-hmm.
for what it is. I don't think there's anything comparable in the United States
Mm-hmm.
except what's private, you know, in the military
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
intelligence community. But you have a public intelligence organization out there.
Yes.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Public
Good.
intelligence is a pretty good way of putting it. I like that. Yeah, I like that.
Now, I asked you if you'd join me on this call
Mm-hmm.
specifically because you sent out, and it was an email that I went, whoa.
So this is the email that John sent me. Dear Stuart, the following struck me in the context of Foresight deliberations here in Brussels. Reflection with the Inter-Director General Foresight and Climate Change groups on the end of normal. A, the COVID crises might not, probably will not end, at least on a century's timescale. Whoa. COVID 2, 3, et al. Will come along, forcing humans to reestablish a more normal place in the interconnected web of life, or quite possibly go extinct. This evolution is no longer even nominally under human control. Accelerating incidences of novel SARS-type virus and our inability to exercise control will lead to a shrinking and more localized world. International travel will remain very risky for generations. Globalized trade in goods the same. Localization will be the emerging new normal. Again, force of circumstances and the regeneration of natural biodiverse barriers between humankind and our so-called viral enemies will occur naturally as we retreat in number and physical disbursement. Next, a new dietary regime is inevitable as the only, for decades, defense against our niche competitors / parasites. Money / debt economic models are already clearly obsolete and will be utterly forgotten within 10 to 15 years. The new mechanism for ensuring we produce what we need and want is emerging, though should also provide fruitful ground for speculation for the many redundant economists who will be available for consultation, their labors in the fields being furnished to the satisfaction of their overseers. Yep, there will still be rich people gaming the system. We will make no more German cars. In short, planning in Northern Europe for this summer's temperature extremes will be addressed, as the loss of 20% plus of atmospheric particulate matter will drive many Northern European cities, especially into dangerous wet bulb temperature extremes. I expect this line of inquiry to be largely informed by the irresistible unfolding of events. It will certainly not be driven by ideas nor words.
So I wanted to discuss that today, if you would. And
I spend a lot of time thinking about, obviously thinking about all this stuff. So in totally understandable fashion, the Commission, not unlike your own government, is desperately trying to keep things going for the time being. So, I mean, the first thing everybody does is try to put some money in the people's pockets, because countless millions of jobs in developed economies are now on furlough. So, how do people keep going? How does the economy keep going? Now, I would do precisely the same thing were I in the White House or were I in government offices in Ireland or any other country. Somehow you've got to keep the thing ticking over. My opinion, however, is that we keep everything ticking over just long enough for the realization to begin to set in that it never goes back. In fact, it never assumes any semblance of what we would have come to accept as being normal. Now, this seems obvious to somebody who works in the foresight domain. So, for example, we have loads of excellent experts around, who are interested in the whole SARS and the emergence of these novel strains of corona type viruses. It is extremely unlikely that this is the last of these viruses. So even are we to entirely master it and come up with a miracle vaccine and so on and so forth, what about next year's one? What about the one after that? What about all the other ones that come? Now, this is a very powerful thing to have to come to terms with. There is no vaccine, there is no cure. I had never seen this coming. For me, one of the things that was in the back of my mind, well, I used to worry a little bit about antibacterial resistance and so on and so forth. But the fact that a virus could be the mechanism whereby Gaia, to use a famous term, Lovelock's term, whereby Gaia suddenly decides to right this particular ship, had never crossed my mind. So think just for a moment about there never being an end of COVID, or COVID 2 or 3 or 4 being something completely different and even more terrible. Let's imagine COVID 3 in 4 years' time is something that attacks the kidneys, and everyone's running around looking for dialysis machines rather than respirators. So you suddenly are faced with the stark reality that even if I had the best job opportunity in the world tomorrow, would I fly to New Orleans? Would I take a job in Wuhan? Would they let me go to Mexico City? So you suddenly say that one of the bedrocks of our understanding of the way the globalized world works, the free movement of people, I don't see that coming back. And I effectively don't see it coming back ever. Now, I say ever in terms of, reasonable timescales, a couple of centuries or decades at least. When we have discussed previously at great lengths, what the world needs to do to get itself off fossil fuels, there was this kind of delusion of human agency. You and I and so many other people honestly thought if we could just tell the truth so that everybody understands, everybody would do the right thing. And there's the wonderful thing about COVID, the wonderful thing, it's a dreadful thing.
I permit you that rhetoric because a lot of people are saying there's a very gleaming silver lining to this.
Yeah. But the extraordinary thing about it is now this decision making is taken out of our hands. So COVID is still, let's say in 6 months' time, we've gotten over some sort of a peak. We're worried that there might be another one, a la the Spanish flu in 2019, 2020. Will all the people go back to the Irish bars, squashed up against one another in these wonderful, happy, sweaty places, drinking pints of Guinness and listening to rebel songs? Will they? Will businessmen jump on a flight, to Wuhan to try and sell some more BMWs to the Chinese billionaires? Will that happen? What does this mean for world trade? And the thing that strikes me is that this doesn't need any human intervention or any ingenuity or any plan. This is simply how it's going to unfold. People are going to find themselves restricted, localized, changed. The other thing that this does then is wonderfully allow the natural systems perhaps to recover, naturally restoring those biodiverse barriers and in distinct ecosystems, which keep the whole system from being interconnected in a very sterile and, we now realize, hugely vulnerable way. Because there's no magic bullet for this. There's no magic vaccine. There's no iPhone app that gets rid of this. What has to happen is a strangely renegotiated place on this planet. I'm not entirely sure we can do it. If I was a betting man, I'd still say we won't be here in 20 years. However, given that the planet is now implementing almost word for word Greta Thunberg's proposals in terms of emissions reductions and so on and so forth, maybe we have a chance.
Well, that's a debate for another day. But
Yeah.
no, seriously. But I want to go a little bit further down the path that you've started
Yeah.
us on, which is not only will things probably not go back to the way they were, cannot go back to the way they were in terms
Yeah.
of our economic view of human reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm famous for poking holes and saying what we call economics is a particular brand, a particular model called neoclassical growth economics. We may
Yes.
not be able to go back to growth. We
Yeah.
hopefully will not be able to go back to growth. So what we need, I believe, at this moment is we need people at the EU Commission and other places. I won't say Washington, D.C., because
Mm-hmm.
we know that's
Mm-hmm.
owned right now by a kleptocrat.
Yeah.
But we need to get some kind of way of distributing goods and services and keeping people alive, albeit not necessarily at a luxurious, privileged, everybody wants the great American dream kind of level, but we
Or
need.
the great European dream. I'm pretty comfortable too.
Yeah, no, well,
Yeah.
yeah, the meme is the great American dream over here, but
Yeah, I know.
okay, but not only won't we be able to get back to that, is we shouldn't even be aiming for it. So it's your job and my job to say, hey guys, there's another way, a la ecological
Yeah.
economics, Herman Daly, Kate Raworth, and I am looking forward to viewing and publishing their talk as soon
Yeah,
as.
it's great. It's good. It's good.
Anyway,
I would go a little bit further. I would go a little bit further. I find myself, and I mean, we both also have an interest in philosophies, both Eastern and Western. But I suppose, in particular, what's striking about this is almost it almost has a Taoist feel to it. We have clearly lost our way. Now we've known we've lost our way. It's very hard not to know you've lost your way when a 16-year-old child would be a far better person to have in charge of a country than the 74-year-old man-child for whom, strangely, I feel nothing but pity. You know, God Almighty, he must be so sad. Anyway, but you know there's something seriously wrong with the world. It must have been the same feeling those brave centurions used to have when Nero was kind of at his worst in Rome. They must have been looking around and saying, there's something wrong with this, guys. This can't last if this is the guy taking the decisions. So, and it's not just that. We can see our ecosystems collapsing around us. The barrier reefs, our food systems, the shift in the polar vortex. We know we're in deep trouble. And one of the things that I find interesting about this is it doesn't matter how much you know it. We don't seem capable of acting on it, and that's fascinating. So that's kind of the addict's lament. And what's interesting to me is we have never really had agency, in my opinion. We haven't had the humility to understand our place in the universe and surf along and have a good time. But it's now patently obvious that we don't have agency. And curiously enough, the world seems to be putting us in a situation that says, well, here's this ingenious thing I came up with. It's going to stop you flying, growing, and globalizing. Now, if I had to come up with a plan for saving the planet, that pretty much would have been it. Now, I don't want to anthropomorphize planet Earth, but wow, that gives us a fighting chance.
In terms of our agency or lack thereof,
yes,
our illusion that we were in control,
yes,
the way I constitute it, and it's obviously just one way of putting it, is that we've had the cart before the horse for a long time, thinking that we controlled money and the economy. But in fact, my thesis, which kind of got me on the road to being heard when I presented this at the climate talks in Lima in 2014, my point was that money, capital M, is a thing, a virus, a meme. It's a thought form. It's not the stuff in your pocket predominantly. It's all of the instructions by which we operate, and money operates us for its own reproductive purposes. I mean, when you said bail out, that's not the right term, because what it means is that the nations are going to their private central banks. The central banks are not part of the nation; they're private, and they're saying,
the States for sure,
except for maybe one or two countries. I mean, Deutsche Bank. So they're going to their banks and saying, we got to print more money. We got to try to jumpstart this engine again. And that means put more money out there, put more. And then we know human frailties, what they are. Most of the money will go into corporate CEO pay, and very little of it will trickle down. And they'll give a check to, a little bit of money, so everybody feels like, oh, they've gotten something out of this $2 trillion bailout in the United States. But it's money reproducing itself across humanity, and money only has the program of consuming resources to make more money. Money doesn't think, but it uses our thinking capacity. But money is in control, and this is
I think one of the things that I'm enjoying at the moment, and my boss, to be fair to him, at one stage sort of said to me, I mean, maybe in some of these emails you could stop with the kind of I'm on this wonderful spiritual retreat thing, because I mean we are in lockdown and it is hard and it's difficult for people, and we're very privileged. I'm privileged to live in a nice house where I can lock down. My kids and my wife are upstairs, eating or watching the TV, and I have a little room that I can. So I get it that the sort of vanity of sort of saying, wow, isn't this cool, you can actually see the world go by, does not apply to so many people. Nevertheless, I want to make the point that even the effort that you're making, and the effort that that Herman Daly was making in earlier talks, to sort of understand and grasp the principles and so on and so forth, I suspect we're just going to be able to let all that go. That it doesn't really matter. There's this wonderful notion of, that the travelers in the forest, like they come to a river and they make a raft that gets them across the river. But when they get to the other side of the river, you don't carry the raft on your back. You leave the raft and you carry on with your journey. Who knows what you'll need for the next challenge? Maybe it'll be climbing boots. So what's interesting me at the moment is the sudden realization on the part of so many people, like, who's important around here? Okay, so I mean, for some people, we obviously, being sort of whole food, plant-based eaters, kind of do most of our own cooking or whatever. But people are saying, wow, I couldn't do it without those Uber delivery guys. They're great. And they come to people's doors all the time. They matter. I'm just taking a crazy example as distinct from the usual nurse and doctor kind of stuff. Like, who actually matters now? What do we need? So Belgium is a country of about 11 million people. Okay, it's kind of ticking over. Now we've got to make sure everybody has some money in the bank. Hats off to the Belgian government. That's one of the first things they're doing, putting about 1,500 euros in everybody's bank account, who's made unemployment, for the duration. And then the question becomes, so what's the duration? And what exactly are you putting in people's bank accounts? Because we all know that fiat currency is made. It's made against the promise of future growth. Now, very soon, everyone's going to realize there ain't no future growth. So what am I doing? And what do I need to keep doing? And what's being done for me? Heat, shelter, some reasonable food, and internet's good. And I'd like to keep the sewers running. That's about it. So a question I keep asking people is, how many thousands of tons of Irish steaks do people need to consume to defeat the coronavirus? I think none. How many German cars do we need to make to defeat the coronavirus? Again, my sneaking feeling is we don't need to make any more German cars, but we do need to get to the far side of this. So the most basic tenets fall away. I don't I don't much feel like referring to things like economies and progress. It's kind of over.
Mhm.
So what's here now?